Hi and welcome to CSO Connected. I'm Tamara McMillen and I'm delighted to be here today with Tom Castley from Outreach. And we are going to have a great conversation talking a bit about the role of the SDR and how do you recruit and maintain a diverse workforce for growth. Tom, you have been with Outreach just since October, is that right?
That's right, 9 weeks, I think.
9 weeks.
Time flies.
When you're having fun.
Yes.
I'm sure it's been nothing but fun. But before that, you were 3 years with Apptio.
That's correct.
And have a long, fantastic career bringing in a lot of SaaS experience to our conversation today. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your move to Outreach.
Yeah, so my move to Outreach recently happened, of course, 9 weeks ago. And that was as a result of me being a customer at Apptio, funnily enough. And unlike Mr. Gillette, I liked the company so much, but I couldn't afford to buy it. But I certainly could go there and work. It's unusual in the CRM space, which is where I spent most of my career in sales, marketing and service, to find a tool that worked. And moreover, actually, people liked using it. So that piqued my interest. And cut a long story short, that was a conversation about what I helped them launch internationally. And with both hands, I grabbed that opportunity.
That's fantastic. Well, we really appreciate you coming here today and sharing with us your experience, because our audience, as you know, are sales leaders themselves, and they're always looking for ways that they can accelerate their growth or optimize their resources. And I think that our main resource that we have is our salespeople.
Yeah.
We have a lot of different types of sales roles in our organizations, and from company to company, and certainly market to market, those roles can get a bit convoluted. I think one of the things we want to focus on today is the sales development rep. And you talked about the value that Outreach has as a tool, and that people actually like using it. The SDR is someone who I imagine uses it extensively. Help us understand, what is a sales development rep? What's the definition that we need to work with, certainly for our conversation today, but that helps provide some clarity even in the market?
Sure. So actually it probably helps to build a slightly wider story to that and kind of a history of time. When we think about salespeople, traditionally, certainly when I started, I was responsible for kind of my own franchise of business. I had to build my pipeline of opportunities, which ultimately I typically got some leads from marketing, from events, or people who've been to our website or downloaded a white paper. And then I would be responsible for developing that pipeline and then ultimately looking to close that business and bring revenue in. And I remember as a rep, I really struggled sometimes from one quarter to the next. If I built some pipeline and that developed into real life opportunities, of course I'm going to go after the revenue. And whilst I'm doing that, I really struggled to carve out the time to continuously build that pipeline ready for the next quarter.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I go a bit boom and bust.
Yeah.
And we see this across all industries. So not just in kind of the SaaS industry where I come from, but whether that's in pharmaceutical, financial services, across transportation, construction, so on and so forth. And so the role of the SDR, although it was formed primarily within the SaaS industry, was a recognition that taking some very expensive, highly paid salespeople and asking them to build pipeline and to close business was asking them to fill two roles, really.
Yeah.
And was there an opportunity to devolve the responsibility for that pipeline building out to another team? A team potentially that would cost a little bit less, so as not to break the unit economics or the CAC. And about 20 odd years ago, Aaron Ross, who was one of the initial sales leaders within Salesforce, I think he set up the enterprise sales teams within Salesforce, wrote a book called Predictable Revenue that has now become famous and talks about that model, that dual sales model where you have people focused on outbound business development, feeding a pipeline of qualified opportunities into those closes. Does that help?
It helps tremendously. And certainly I've used SDR teams, and the point that you made earlier, it's about recognizing the value of those feet on the street and the person that can really take that sale through its pipeline process and bring it to closure. And they do waste an incredible amount of time on the qualifying process. And some of the technology tools that are out there today, I think, can help even optimize the SDR's time, because I think research, dialing numbers, figuring out the right person to talk to, getting through to the right person on the other end, knowing what to talk about in your conversation. Those are some of the things that an SDR is really responsible for that have been optimized over time. Have you seen that happen? And what are some of the key things that they're using today to make their time as efficient as possible?
Sure. Well, obviously there is a natural unintended consequence of taking this process, the process of pipeline development, and refining it and accelerating it, means that there is more of a requirement for data to go into that process, and to ensure that things aren't being dropped, and that everybody's being followed up, and that it doesn't feel like it's a production line. It actually feels like it's still authentic, which is key in the whole process. So there are a plethora of tools which are available, all the way from data providers to, as you say, dialers, which help with making sure that you don't lose any time during the voice calls with people, and also task and activity tracking stuff. And that is an area that outreach obviously operates in.
Yeah, I've had conversations with leaders who are slightly hesitant to move that function into a real SDR type team for fear of the handoff that happens. They've built some relationship and rapport with the contact on the other end. They've set that meeting, but different people will show up. What have you seen as a successful way to do that from the customer perspective? And then also, there's always that funny bit of compensation question or what happens inside the organization between the folks who got the right to have the discussion and those that close the deal and might get the really big check. Can you touch on those areas for us?
I can, yeah. And just as a preface to that as well, again, there's a lot of research that's around at the moment. If you listen to corporate executive board and other commentators, they'll say that buyers are more educated than they ever have been before. And there are now more personas which are involved in every single sales opportunity. So if you listen to their stats at the moment, I believe over the last 5 or 6 years, it's moved from about 55% of the way through the buying process to 63% of the way through the buying process.
I've read as high as 75%
wow.
as well.
So
it's just unbelievable.
So we have buyers who are coming to organisations having already decided what it is that they would like, how it's going to address an issue or challenge that they're facing, the value that they attach to it, and how they would like to go about buying that, under what terms. So actually very little room for selling in that environment. Compound that with the fact that it's now gone from 5 to 7 to 11 personalities or people that you need to interact with to get a deal done of any kind of size within a customer organisation, means this is complex. It's more complex than it's ever been. I'm a huge fan of the term, you can only sell the value you create. And when you think about that, if you only start engaging with somebody when they've come inbound to your organisation and they're potentially 75% of the way through the process, we've lost 3/4 of the time to be able to generate that value. Effectively, they've narrowed to the point of which there is no negotiations. Can you do what we want or not?
It's also interesting because I think you've lost the right to influence the solution that they decide is necessary. And when you work in a complex sales environment, there are many levers and nuances to those solutions that, you're right, becomes a pricing exercise and potentially around the wrong set of criteria.
So here's the thing as well. So we're saying in one breath we'd like to use SDRs to help build our pipeline and develop our opportunities. We also said at the beginning of this section, a lot of people look to hire less experienced, less costly resources to be able to do that. And yet right at the beginning of the sales cycle is where you have the greatest potential to influence the future value or direction of a particular deal. It's a real juxtaposition in terms of we're literally giving the gold right at the beginning of the sales cycle to somebody else. So that says to me, that excites me about both the importance of that role within an organisation, the potential for it to explode revenue within an organisation. But as you say, absolute key to getting that right is one, the enablement, training, selection, coaching, of those resources early in their career typically. And two is that handoff process to make sure that the rapport and the relationship and the credibility that has been built up early in the sales cycle isn't lost as you hand it over to the closing team, to the traditional salespeople.